Chapter 118, Infirmary Blues, Hanyu's POV. When Hanyu woke up, he was momentarily confused to find himself in the infirmary. Lord Julia had tried to talk him into returning to Antony's rooms to sleep, but he couldn't bear to leave his master or Asao. Anyhow, leaving would have meant releasing Antony's hand, and that simply wasn't an option. Lord Julia had seemed ready to force him out, but Thad had pleaded his case. Finally, she had capitulated and set up a second cot next to Antony's. Hanyu had fallen asleep with his god's hand still clasped tightly. It would have been very romantic if it had still been there when he woke, but Hanyu had clearly moved in his sleep, and his hand was now empty, much like his stomach and very, very much unlike his bladder. How long had he slept? He sat up and looked around. Antony still lay on the cot next to Hanyu's. He seemed strangely vulnerable, stretched out on his back instead of curled into a ball as he usually was when he slept. Of course, the cuts, bruises, swelling, and myriad bandages might also have had something to do with that impression of vulnerability. Maybe these injuries weren't as grievous as the ones Antony had sustained the time Marcus cut up his back, but his face certainly looked worse. It was puffy and bruised, and his beautiful thin lips were all cut up. He looked better than he had when Hanyu went to sleep, but not by much. Hanyu yearned to press careful kisses to every battered inch of him. "Good morning," or whenever it is. Hanyu whirled at the sound of Lord Julia's voice. She and Thad were still next to the other cot, where they had been most of the time since Hanyu came down here. The healer came over frequently to check on Antony, but Asao was clearly the patient who commanded most of her attention. And Asao was leaning up on some pillows. He was awake! Hanyu didn't even realize that he had scrambled from the cot and run towards his friend until Lord Julia caught him gently, but firmly, around his waist. "Easy," she scolded. "You can sit next to him, but don't touch. He's injured." Hanyu nodded so hard he made himself dizzy. "Yes, sorry, of course! Oh, Asao!" "Hello, Hanyu," his friend whispered. Asao was tilting his head away slightly. If his hair had been loose, it would have fallen in his face. As it was, his hair was pulled up in a tight bun, and there was nothing to obscure his countenance. He looked bad, to be sure, but he was clean, bandaged, and stitched, so he also looked cared for. Compared with the way he'd looked on the beach, this was such a vast improvement that Hanyu almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. Another second, and it didn't matter. He couldn't see anything at all through his flood of sudden tears. "You're really all right!" he cried, flopping into the chair Thad had just vacated. "I'm so glad! Is your eye really gone?" Thad let out a little squawk, and Hanyu clapped his hands over his mouth. "Fuck! Gods! Someone should put a muzzle on me!" "Yes," Asao was still whispering. "It's gone." "Maybe Lord Antony really will muzzle me. That would do for a start to my punishments. One won't even begin to cover all this. Gods, what have I done?" "Oh, Asao, I'm so sorry." The tears spilled over now, hot and miserable. "I was so stupid and selfish, and I never meant for any of this to happen." "You couldn't have stopped it," Asao breathed, still not looking at him. "Lord Marcus came to Lord Antony's rooms looking for you. If you had been where he expected, I think maybe he would have killed us both." "That fucker!" Lord Julia snarled, startling both of them. "After seeing what happened to Titus and how upset Antony was, that was his first thought. I wish Felix had left him tied up to welcome the sunrise." Of course, Lord Titus. What had Marcus said about him? Something about being a drooling vegetable? What did that vicious statement even mean? "What happened to Lord Titus, my lord?" Even as he asked, Hanyu suspected that he didn't really want to know. Lord Julia sighed. "He's catatonic. He can't move or speak independently, though he's fine physically and seems capable of going where he's led. Apparently, he underwent some sort of traumatic crisis, committed some murders, and now, well, here we are. As you can imagine, Antony was crushed. Oh, merciful gods! I am scum! Hanyu had gone to the island in a fit of pique because Antony wasn't paying attention to him, and in the meantime his master had been suffering. His snit seemed so petty and selfish compared to what Antony had endured. And then Antony had fought his lover and been beaten, all on the same night, and he must have felt so hurt and miserable, and all Hanyu had done was make everything worse. He wanted to throw himself at Antony's feet in repentance, but the god was still asleep. Of course, Antony wasn't the only one he'd wronged. Asau had suffered for him too, traded his eye and his beauty and very nearly his life for one desperate act, one chance to help Hanyu escape. And I didn't even take it. I wasted his courage, just like I waste every chance and good thing I'm given. "Oh, Asau, why did you stab him for me?" he wailed, overcome. "I didn't deserve—" Thad's gasp startled him enough to cut off the coming storm of words. "Asau!" the god cried. Marcus? Did you really stab Marcus?" Hanyu dashed the tears from his eyes in time to see Asau's shoulders stiffen. "Please forgive your humble servant, my lord. I was wrong." "You were not." Lord Julia was grinning broadly. "Thad, I'm so sorry I forgot to tell you about that. You see, Asau didn't just grapple with Marcus to save Hanyu. He also stabbed him in the foot with that shark tooth you gave him." Thad gasped again, even louder. Hanyu found himself a little startled by the starry-eyed, adoring gaze the god turned to Asau. "He doesn't just like him, he admires him." That was a strange thought. Hanyu and the other members of their cadre had always looked up to Asau, naturally, but a god? It made sense for gods to enjoy their human slaves, favor them, even care deeply for them if they are exceptionally kind. But Thaddeus wasn't looking at Asau the way someone looked at a pleasing, beloved slave. He looked like a child meeting his hero and finding him more wonderful than he dreamed. "Oh, Asau!" Thad whispered, reverent. Asau must not have noticed the same admiration in the god's voice that Hanyu did. He flinched and lowered his eyes, the closest he could come to a bow. "Your servant has no excuse," he whispered. "I swear that I will never raise a hand to one of the gods again. It was a blasphemy beyond forgiveness." "Oh dear, no!" Thad shook his head vigorously. "It was the right thing to do. Every time I think I know how brave you are, you prove me wrong. Amazing." Yes, Hanyu thought miserably. Asau is brave and wonderful, and he should never have let a weak, needy thing like me latch on to him. I almost got him killed. A person so incredible that gods look at him like that, and he was nearly gone because he felt like he had to protect a useless parasite. It's unforgivable. Asau glanced nervously at Hanyu, then down again. "If you still had any interest in claiming such a badly behaved slave, my lord, I can only beg you to believe that I would never do such a thing to you. I would accept your will and your discipline without resistance. You could do as you chose with me, and I would never defy you." "Wait, what? Is Asau really going to belong to Titus now? Will Lord Antony allow that? Why does Asau want to— No, that's ridiculous. There's 1,000 reasons why Asau would want to leave, starting with his eye and the fact that he only has one now." "If you lived with me," Thad said firmly, "and I seemed likely to harm you or make you do something that upset you, I hope you would stab me. Not just with a tooth, either." Lord Julia nodded. "As soon as a human moves in with anyone in our family, we give them a knife. They are fully authorized to protect themselves with it, especially from us." Asau made a startled squawk. It was very unlike his usual controlled, deliberately sweet speech, and it was also the first time Hanyu had heard him use his voice instead of whispering since waking up. Any horrified outcry was cut off by Cloelia's voice, muffled by the door. Had she been out there the whole time? "Theodora's here. She can come in, right?" "Of course." Lord Julia strode over and opened the door. "You know, you don't have to keep watch like this," Theo was saying to Cloelia as the door swung open. "I have 4 guards on Marcus and Titus. One of them is Sinisa. Even Felix has been taking shifts. Those 2 aren't going anywhere." "It just makes me feel better," Cloelia boomed. "Anyhow, I like to stay close by, and I'm too loud for a sick room." "You are never too loud for my sick room, love," Lord Julia protested, but Cloelia was already closing the door behind Theo. Theo didn't look so good. Her shoulders were slumped, and though she didn't have the dark circles under her eyes, something in her demeanor reminded Hanyu of the way she had been during Chihiro's last weeks. Even still, she tried to smile for them. "Asao, it's so good to see you awake." She slung an arm over Hanyu's shoulder. "That's a relief to all of us. You're a miracle worker, Julia." Lord Julia's lips pressed tight. "And Hanyu, you're looking much better," Lord Theo continued, squeezing him reassuringly. "Did you get some sleep?" "Yes, my lord," he said, feeling unworthy of both the sleep he'd had and the concern she was showing for him. "Is Antony—" She looked across the room, her gaze so unhappy and yearning that Hanyu dropped his eyes, feeling like he had accidentally seen her naked. "He's been drifting in and out of consciousness," Lord Julia said. "Rest is the best thing for him. I'm thinking about going and getting him a small dose of elf blood to help the healing along." "Hasn't he already had his share for the year? He'll kick up a terrible fuss if you give him more." "If he can kick up any kind of fuss, it will mean that his sternum, ribs, skull, shoulder, and collarbone have healed, and his tongue has grown back," Lord Julia said bluntly. "Frankly, I'd welcome a good tantrum." Asao made a low, wounded noise, and Hanyu realized that his own eyes were spilling fresh tears. "Gods, it's that bad? His skull? His tongue? All that for us! For me! After I went to the island in the first place to piss him off!" "I'm going to ask him to send me away." The mere thought turned his trickle of tears into a torrent, but something very cold and certain had settled in the pit of Hanyu's stomach. Most likely Lord Antony already planned to get rid of him for all the trouble he'd caused, but if by some miracle the god didn't send him away on his own, yes, Hanyu would ask him to do it. It was clearly what had to happen. Hanyu had seen his master battered and suffering for his sake twice now. He couldn't bear the thought of it happening a 3rd time. He would go to live in the barracks or to work in the kitchens or something. He would fade out of Lord Antony's life, leave him to the peace that Hanyu's antics had shattered in the first place. Lord Julia hissed. "Oh, fuck you two. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You know he'll be fine. It will take some time, but soon it will be all healed up. He's going to be all right." "I really do think you ought to give him the blood," Thad fretted. "If it's as bad as all that, we can't just let him suffer when—" "Ugh!" The angry, wordless grunt drew every eye to Antony's cot. The god was still lying flat as a corpse, but his eyes were open. He glowered ferociously, and Hanyu's heart squeezed painfully at the dear, familiar expression. It was hard work not to fly forward, grab his hands, fall at his feet, soak his bandages with tears. Hanyu held himself back, though. "I can't keep hurting him." Oh! Antony growled when he saw that he had their attention. "Was that supposed to be no blood?" "I'm the healer," Lord Julia reminded him. "Also, I have the only other key." "Oh!" Lord Theo had ignored all of this, letting her arm fall from Hanyu's shoulder as she crossed the room. She pulled Hanyu's cot back a little and sat on it, leaning over Antony. She grabbed up one of his hands and pressed it to her forehead. "Antony," she exhaled, and her shoulders relaxed for the first time. Damn it, you asshole! I'm never sending you off on your own again. I'm so sorry. You fucker! I love you! When she started crying, Hanyu finally asked if he could use Lord Julia's washroom. As soon as the door shut behind him, he slid to the ground and wept harder than he had ever done before. Twice was too much. There won't be a third time. I'll see that they're both all right, and then it would be time to do the first unselfish thing of his life.